Well, you know, I met Secretary Acosta this first time I know when I made the deal to bring him on into the administration. I can tell you that for 2.5 years, he's been just an excellent Secretary of Labor. He's done a fantastic job. Now, part of it is our economy is so good, our unemployment numbers are at record lows. You know, so many good things are happening. But the fact is, he's been a very good Secretary of Labor. What happened 12 or 15 years ago with respect to when he was a U.S. attorney, I think in Miami, is it Miami? Yes. You know, if you go back and look at everybody else's decisions, whether it's a U.S. attorney or an assistant U.S. attorney or a judge, you go back 12 or 15 years ago or 20 years ago and look at their past decisions, I would think you'd probably find that they would wish they maybe did it a different way. I do hear that there were a lot of people involved in that decision, not just him. I can only say this from what I know, and what I do know is that he's been a great, really great Secretary of Labor. The rest of it we'll have to look at. We'll have to look at it very carefully. But you're talking about a long time ago. And again, it was a decision made, I think, not by him, but by a lot of people. So we're going to look at it very carefully. We'll be looking at that very carefully. Okay? Okay, anybody else? Well, I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I mean, people in Palm Beach knew him. He was a fixture in Palm Beach. I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan. I was not, a long time ago. I'd say maybe 15 years. I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his. So I feel very badly, actually, for Secretary Acosta because I've known him as being somebody that works so hard and has done such a good job. I feel very badly about that whole situation. But we're going to be looking at that and looking at it very closely.
Amid the arrest of serial sexual predator and pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, Secretary of Labor Alexander Acosta has been thrust into the spotlight. And here's why. Epstein was a wealthy investment banker who became notorious for soliciting teenage girls, most of whom were between 13 and 16, and paying them for massages, which frequently turned into sexual acts. In 2008, federal prosecutors in Miami, led by Alexander Acosta, drafted a 53-page indictment against him. Only instead of Epstein facing federal charges, Acosta's team struck a deal with his lawyers, allowing him to face state charges instead of federal charges, which, instead of life in prison, carried only a 13-month sentence, where he was able to leave for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week on a work release privilege. A 1-year prison sentence where he was free to leave prison 6 out of 7 days a week isn't prison. The Herald revealed that Acosta was personally involved in the negotiations to offer Epstein his sweetheart deal, a deal that was criticized for giving Epstein's lawyers an unusual amount of control over the terms of the plea deal. And the non-prosecution deal would also fail to notify any of the victims until after it had been finalized. If the optics of all of this look really bad for Acosta, that's because they are. Which is why Acosta himself took to Twitter today, saying that Epstein's crimes are horrific, and he's pleased that New York prosecutors are moving forward with the case based on new evidence. He gave himself credit for insisting Epstein go to jail in 2008 and register as a sex offender. Only Epstein went for only a year instead of the rest of his life. And that is what Acosta is actually responsible for. Acosta doesn't get extra credit for doing the absolute bare minimum that his job requires. Yes, of course Epstein registered as a sex offender. He raped children. Acosta goes on to say that now that new evidence is available, the New York prosecution has the opportunity to more fully bring him to justice. Except, again, the only reason that Epstein wasn't more fully brought to justice last time was because the prosecution team led by Acosta gave him a cushy plea deal. Alexander Acosta is literally applauding prosecutors for having the opportunity to do something that he himself precluded them from doing last time when he was prosecutor. This is the epitome of bad faith. It's like if Johnny Cochran cheered on the fact that O.J. Simpson got arrested the second time. What Acosta is doing is pretending that all of this evidence didn't exist before, but there was a 53-page indictment. They had phone records, trash pulls, flight manifests, witness testimonies. There were federal charges before suddenly there weren't. This is who the White House tapped as labor secretary, one of the, quote, best people that Trump promised to hire. Of course, the White House has been doing its best to pivot away from this by pointing to what else but the economy. And it's not just Trump. The White House sent out its star distractor to do the same.
I talked to the president this morning. He hasn't talked to or had contact with Epstein in years and years and years, and over a decade at least, he said. And he met Alex Acosta when Alex applied and got the job, where he's doing a great job. I mean, look at the economy. So I know everybody, you want to revisit what happened in Florida. New York has applied fresh charges to Jeffrey Epstein because they have a right to do that. And I hope we're all paying attention to who the true perpetrator is here.
Well, good news for anyone looking to coddle pedophiles out there. At the very least, you've got the tacit approval from the White House so long as arbitrary factors like the economy are doing well. But Trump's involvement with this whole situation extends beyond Acosta's promotion to Labor Secretary. Trump himself actually praised Epstein, saying in 2002 he'd known him for 15 years and he was a terrific guy. He said, "He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side." Yep, nothing like making light of pedophilia. Of course, there's more. Trump was also named as a defendant in a lawsuit alongside Jeffrey Epstein in 2016. The suit claimed that Trump raped the then 13-year-old anonymous plaintiff in the 90s. A second woman was added to the complaint who claimed that Epstein had her pick up teenage girls for his parties, including the original plaintiff, and that she witnessed both Trump and Epstein rape that girl multiple times. The suit, however, was ultimately dropped, but clearly there's evidence that Epstein and Trump were acquaintances through the early 2000s. There were reports from the 90s and early 2000s that Trump attended Epstein-hosted events, that Trump called Epstein twice in 2004, that Trump's phone numbers were listed in Epstein's black book, that Trump once went on Epstein's plane from Florida to New York, and that Epstein had been a visitor at Mar-a-Lago. That's not to say that he was guilty of anything that Epstein did, but the company he kept speaks volumes. So to be clear, while the White House may try and cry victim and claim that they're being targeted for something that Jeffrey Epstein did, it's because Alexander Acosta let a pedophile walk the streets with nothing more than a slap on the wrist. Epstein deserves to go to prison for the rest of his life. Alexander Acosta deserves to be remembered for coddling a pedophile, and Trump deserves to be remembered for giving the guy who let that pedophile walk the streets a job in the White House.